following Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
One of the top five questions that we get asked as a company is about batteries, whether it's batteries and exit signs or inverters or emergency lights, and really around the technology of those and where are things going and all the things that go into that. And this Chalk Talk today is going to address all of those concerns, hopefully, and we are going to release a little bit of a teaser about a new AIA CEU course. So I don't want to get out over my skis too much on this, but hello, everybody. My name is Matt Bird. Along with me is Greg Keel, who covers the western half of the country. Running the Chalk Talk for us today is Tom Deutsch, who is our sales support engineer. And again, this is a great Chalk Talk. I've seen all three of these already, and this is going to be no exception to the information that's delivered to you and then some of the resources as a follow-up for you to be able to deliver. So we appreciate everyone being on here for our last Chalk Talk of May. Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Matt. And without further ado, let's just roll right into it. We're going to be talking about two different really fun topics today. Primarily, we're going to be talking about AIA courses. If you're with me for the Chalk Talk on the new AIA course I brought in before a couple months ago, then this will all be recapped, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. I just want to go over some of our courses just so everyone's aware of what we got. And then finally, we're going to roll into some battery stuff. We're going to talk about battery basics and battery chemistries, all that you guys need to know to dive into batteries. First, we'll talk about our AIA courses. So just so everybody knows what these things are, they provide continuing education credit and are in general going to be the most in-depth explanations you're going to get as to how the life safety world works. They cover all aspects of life safety, including how the devices work, how you can pick the right device for you, how you can ensure that your system is meeting code compliance, and then also a bunch of other little industry goodies. Our first AIA course we have to offer would be the egress marking and illumination, which is going to cover exit signs and emergency lights. You can split them up into two 30-minute courses if you like, one on exit signs, one on emergency lights. These are going to focus pretty heavily into the code and how you can install an exit sign or an emergency light into your building. Next would be inverters, ISO 1002. This is going to be a deep dive into inverters. It's going to be, all the basics of how inverters work, how you integrate them into a system, and a little bit, it'll touch on these UL 924 and 1008 devices. If you want to get deeper into those and really have an understanding of how they work, exactly how they fit into a one-line diagram, that's going to be our ISO 1010. So that's going to dive deeply into both of those devices, and it's going to go into diagrams. It's going to tell you the different applications, and it's going to tell you how these devices are going to integrate with different types of controls that you might have on the job. But finally, what we're really here today to discuss are the new AIA courses. So I did already give a Chalk Talk on this emergency lighting cost comparison course, ISO 1020. If you'd like to, you can go back on the website and look at that Chalk Talk, or you can go ahead and schedule this with us. This is going to be a comparison of all the different life safety systems that you can have to give you emergency lighting in a building. So it's divided into small inverters, one large building scale inverter, as well as battery packs and unitary emergency lights. We'll go through a real example. It's a hotel with a parking garage, and we will decide exactly how much it's going to cost all the way down to the wire. And in the end, you're getting the experience of doing that exercise, and you'll be able to do it yourself for any building you'd like. But additionally, if that's not something you're interested in, at the very least, you're going to get a sense of how much the different types of systems cost. But what I really want to discuss today, and what we're going to have a little sample of to follow, is this Life Safety Battery Technologies AIA course, our ISO 1030. So this is brand new for us. This is something that I just wrapped up creating, and it's going to be a deep dive into batteries, a very deep dive, all the different chemistries, the way that batteries work, the environmental considerations, the installation considerations, anything you'd possibly want to know or not want to know about batteries, you're going to get in this AIA course. And what I'm going to do now is I'm essentially just going to give you the abridged version. So we are just going to talk about batteries for the rest of this Chalk Talk, which is something I'm certainly passionate about. So let's have some fun. My first question is, what is life safety? I think this is a good starting point for us. Life safety systems, as most of us know, they help you get out of a building in the event of an emergency. And, what is an emergency? Well, in our minds, in life safety world, an emergency is just a loss of power, meaning that the building is no longer being supplied power from the grid, and it has now been plunged into darkness. And we'd like to have something to help people, especially people who might not be familiar with the building, to allow them to get out of the building, because maybe there's a fire, maybe they just don't want to be in there. Regardless, they need to be able to get out of this building. And that is all controlled by NFPA 101. And what NFPA 101 essentially mandates is that our systems, our life safety systems, are going to help us detect an emergency. They're going to have to be independent from the power grid, naturally, because we don't have any power available. And then they also need to last long enough for people to get out and be bright enough as well. My next question for us is, what is a battery? Well, I can give you a basic definition. Batteries, they store chemical energy and they release it as electrical energy when needed. These batteries are often divided into cells. These cells can range anywhere from about 1 volt to about 4 volts. Inside of each one of these cells, there's a chemical reaction occurring between two different materials. These are called your electrodes. They will be divided up into the cathode or the anode, and they will be sitting in some sort of a liquid or gel, and that's called the electrolyte. And they will produce a flow of electrons through a process called oxidation, and this flow of electrons we call electricity. And that is how we are supplying power from a battery. It is storing chemical energy, and then it's releasing it as electrical energy. And that's all happening within not just a battery, but one individual cell of a battery. One of these that are only a couple of volts, they're going to be combined into whatever system voltage you need. For an exit sign, it's probably going to be anywhere from maybe 6 volts, 10 volts, 12 volts, and then up from there. There's a couple important principles to batteries that we should really understand. And the first is that all batteries are slowly decreasing in their capacity, often measured in amp hours or milliamp hours. You can see on this graph to the left that as you continue to cycle through batteries, as you continue to add cycles, but also as you continue to add time to these batteries, the total AH or amp hours is going to decrease. So no matter what you do, especially though as you cycle them, the batteries are going to lose capacity. Which means that eventually, especially in the emergency lighting world, they won't be able to adequately perform their task. A lot of us have experienced this with our smartphones. You'll notice that as the years go on, your phone just doesn't seem to hold a charge the same way it used to. It drains, that percentage battery life drains more quickly. But they can also die a little bit quicker if you're not treating them right. So for example, temperature is a big one. You can see on this graph below that the colder the temperature is, the less capacity you're going to have as well. And then also other considerations are if you're not charging and discharging these batteries properly, you're also going to experience a shortened life. And if you're doing either one of these things in any sort of an extreme way, you're going to notice a pretty quick death of your battery. Now the question becomes, how can we prolong our battery's life? Well, the very first thing and most important thing we can do is keep them conditioned. Anything around room temperature is going to be ideal. You don't want your batteries to be uncomfortable. Typically, if you're comfortable in a room, especially for an extended period of time, your battery's going to be comfortable as well. I don't think you'd enjoy very much if you sat in 100 degrees for several days. So the batteries feel pretty much the exact same way. So as I mentioned, they also care about how they're being charged and discharged. This includes both the rate and the depth of both the charge and the discharge. So if you're pumping them full of electricity way too quickly or pulling too much out of them too quickly, that's going to hurt the battery. And then additionally, if you're pulling too much out of them and they're already at a low state of charge and you keep trying to squeeze every little bit of electricity out of the battery, that's going to hurt it. Same thing with overly charging it. If the battery's already at 100% state of charge and you keep trying to pump voltage into it, it's going to damage the battery as well. Some batteries like exercise and some batteries don't like exercise. There's this thing called the memory effect. And what this phenomenon affects batteries if they are being discharged to a certain amount repeatedly. So they basically get used to what they're doing. So if you're going from 100% state of charge to 50% state of charge, and that's what you're doing every time you're using the battery, eventually you're not going to be able to go below 50% state of charge. It's just going to die because it's sort of like etching that pattern into the battery. And not all batteries are going to experience this. I'm going to tell you about a couple different chemistries to follow, and the first couple will be susceptible to this, and then from then on, the memory effect isn't the biggest deal in the world. It's not even something that they experience. Now, overcharging and over discharging is one of the quickest ways. I mentioned that, but that is one of the quickest ways to decrease a battery's life. And then also, some batteries can experience something called thermal runaway. This is going to only affect a couple of lithium-ion chemistries, and it's something that isn't very common. If you've ever heard of phones or EVs just spontaneously catching fire, they probably ended up with something called thermal runaway. So it's not something that's very common, especially in the life safety world. You tend to pretty much never see this, but it is a phenomenon that affects batteries and their life. As for life safety, what do we care about? Well, charging and discharging is handled for you, so you don't even need to think about that. All that's really required is basically don't let the battery sit disconnected for too long. You don't want to, especially if you have lead acid batteries, especially if you have a big inverter system, you don't want to let the batteries just sit there disconnected for a number of months. We typically like to say that any less than 6 months, you're probably okay. The reality is it's all relative. The longer they sit, the more damage they're going to incur. If they sat a number of years, potentially they'd completely stop working on you. But all these little things, it's all about health and prolonging its life. So one thing we do offer on our inverters is we can pre-ship the cabinets and we can ship the batteries out to you at a later date. So if you know that the job might be a little bit stagnant, maybe you know the inverter is not going to get installed for a couple of months, that would be a scenario where you can let us know that you'd like us to pre-ship the cabinets on the inverters. And then also, as I mentioned before, but it is the most important fact here, just keep the batteries as close to room temperature as you possibly can. We understand sometimes it's going outside. We do provide temperature ranges at which these batteries can handle things. And, that doesn't always mean that it's going to handle it and experience just as long of a life as something that's, sitting in a cool 70-degree, 65-degree building all day long. But just try to keep them comfortable if you can. And if it does have to go outside, it's probably best to use a heater. So if you're going to be sticking it outside and it's an outdoor option or it's an outdoor sign, make sure to specify the heater option. For Isolite, that's going to be either HX, H1, or H2. Now, as I mentioned, batteries come in many different flavors. So the oldest flavor and still one of the most common technologies we'll see nowadays is the lead acid battery. These were the first rechargeable batteries. They're still used. Almost everyone's car has one of these things. They're big in inverters. They are relatively less expensive. I will mention that most of these chemistries end up being pretty similar to each other in terms of price. There's not a crazy disparity, but they tend to be pretty inexpensive since they've been around over 100 years, but they are a little bit heavier. They contain lead, and lead is very heavy. NiCad batteries, still, over 100 years ago, they started to be developed, but they're still super popular because they're great at low temperatures. The downsides, depending on how you look at it, they do have cadmium in there. It's not the most friendly element in the world. So, if you do have a fire, if the thing combusts, or you have to deal with end of life, you definitely can't throw it out. It could poison the soil. So have to find, same with all of these really, a battery recycling facility, but extra important for NiCad. NiCad does experience a bit of a memory effect. This isn't something we're going to have to worry about in life safety because that charging and discharging is handled for us, but it is important to note that the NiCad battery experiences the memory effect, and so does our next battery, the nickel metal hydride. That has a much decreased It did come around almost 100 years later, but a much decreased memory effect. It does have better energy density as well. This is a battery type that you're going to see used in, for example, Toyota Priuses, other hybrid vehicles, maybe some EVs will use these. Nickel metal hydride still a super common battery chemistry. Now we're digging into some of the more recent battery chemistries. So lithium iron phosphate is a lithium ion variant. You can hear lithium in the name. These are going to have a super long life, definitely longer than any of the other battery chemistries. They're super thermally stable, and these batteries are going to last a long time and be super safe. So, we mentioned some lithium ion batteries will be prone to thermal runaway. These specifically are not prone to any thermal runaway at all. They're going to be really big in energy storage systems because they kind of work like a lead acid. They're not the most energy dense, and they are relatively inexpensive. But these are going to be big in energy storage and EVs. So a lot of cars are going to use these, especially for manufacturers who don't want to see any sort of fires popping up in their EVs. In 2008, we got the newest chemistry. That is the lithium nickel manganese cobalt oxide, commonly just called NMC. This is a really high energy density lithium ion chemistry. So if you want an emergency fixture or anything, especially, for example, smartphones, your iPhone, if you have an iPhone, probably has a nickel manganese cobalt battery in there. It's great for just being super dense. It has a low volume to it, so it can fit in something like a smartphone or, for example, a compact emergency light. And you'll find these in EVs as well. Anywhere you need good energy density, you can look to NMC. Just to dig in real quick on the chemistries we will find in our life safety systems. Inverter, it's going to be all lead acid, especially larger inverters. Any sort of building scale inverter from any manufacturer, you're going to see lead acid batteries in them. If you go down to mini inverters and micro inverters, you could see pretty much any of those other chemistries. For exit signs and emergency lights, again, you're liable to see pretty much any of these chemistries, especially depending on which sort of sign or light it is. So more industrial, you're probably going to see more lead acid. More aesthetic signs, some of the more specification grade stuff, a lot of the more compact stuff, you're probably going to see some of those more energy dense chemistries. Pretty much anything other than lead acid is going to be more energy dense, so you can fit, more capacity in a smaller space. For outdoor products, these are still dominated by NiCad because NiCad is just better at handling the cold than any other battery. And many of these products, they will come with that heater option I mentioned earlier. This is just a simple device that wraps around the battery pack and keeps the battery warm. That's all I have for you on batteries today. I just like to go through and let you know some of the resources we have available. So up on our website, you'll find this new AIA course. You can go ahead and schedule that with us, as well as many of the other AIA courses. They're all available, and some of them are even available on demand, so check that out. We also have all the previous Chalk Talks listed up on the website under resources as well. And I'd also like to mention that all the spec sheets will have which chemistry the device has listed on it. So if you're curious, you see an outdoor sign, oh, it has NiCad. Well, that makes sense. Now you know. We've learned a lot about batteries today. If you'd like to dig deeper, please look into that new AIA course. As always, there will be a follow-up sales packet to follow this presentation, along with a link and a PDF to it. Need any further assistance? You can always contact me or any of these other guys. We're always here for you. Our emails are listed right here on the screen as well. All right, thank you for listening to today's presentation on batteries.